All right, here we go. Season 7. If you're catching us on the replay, this is a simple little lead in just to give us a little time for the viewers to pop in. See the little eyeball at the top of my screen show more than 0. So, but if it is 7 o'clock Central Time and it is the first Thursday after the New Year, that means it's time for Season 7 of the CarrGuy and SIXFAN show. I'm your host, Grant Tommy, tonight. But this gentleman acting as co-host over here, if you don't know him by now, is...
I am Jason. I am the old car guy, or the car guy of the CarrGuy SIXFAN show. Welcome to 2022. Hope everybody had a good New Year. Thanks for joining us. And as you all know, this is the start of season 7 of the CarrGuy and SIXFAN show. Grant, I think it's been an awesome road. I think we got a great season planned ahead of us, and I'm ready to get the ball started.
Yeah, certainly action-packed, jam full of guests. We still have a few open slots, but we do that on purpose. We kind of leave a few open just because at some point it's like nobody knows what the heck they're going to be doing on a Thursday night in April, right? So we try to fill it up about 3/4 of the way. So we'll get into that maybe towards the end of the show of some of the guests to expect here in season 7. But tonight's just a simple legacy episode where it's just the two of us chatting cars, kind of going back to our roots. Jason, before we get into tonight's topic, why don't you take us through who's in the chat?
Yeah, well, we started out with Mopar Dem was the first one in there, so thanks for being the keener of the show tonight. Prep and Life, Will's Wheels is in there, Turlo's Garage, and we've also got Gary Mathis, Everything is Broken Garage. Ryan, thanks for jumping in. We've also got Rob Van Squirrel. He's late, but thanks for being here. Anyway, no one's ever late for the CarrGuy and SIXFAN show. You're just a part of the team. King Eric, the greatest of all, we can get the show started now. William Sanders, thanks, guys, for joining. And we'll have more and more people jump in here as the night goes on.
And I know Eric's probably disappointed to know that tonight's topic isn't trying to pick the best Mercury, compare the best Mercury up against the best Ford from a date-to-date year range. But since, again, peek behind the curtains here at the CarrGuy and SIXFAN show, the prep as each season goes on for Jason and I gets less and less. And so what did we say we were going to do to start off season 7 was nothing more than rip off the same thing we did for the start of season 5, which, if you remember, was the sort of the hot rod or the hot dog race of Buick, Oldsmobile, and Pontiac GM bodies, 64 to 72. So we figured, why not just do part 2 and pick up where we left off? So tonight we're going to go from 1973 to 1977. It's offbeat hot rodding at its peak. It's what the OPEC era is one I like to call the odd body era. And so with that, Jason, give me a few seconds and I'll do the screen share. But anything you'd like to add?
Yeah, so one of the things that we also try and do in between having guests on the CarrGuy and SIXFAN show is we always like to kind of break it up a little bit with 4 separate what we call legacy episodes. And that's where we just talk about cars. We pick a topic that may or may not be controversial or something that we could actually get you guys engaged in talking with us. So we really appreciate the fact that you guys are willing to join in and listen to us talk a little bit about what we classify, or Grant has classified, as odd bodies, and we're picking up with the 70s or the mid to late 70s. And so at this point, we're going to hand it over to Grant to introduce everything. So put on your leisure suits. Things are about to get funky.
Yeah. So again, I think if you guys are just catching me for the first time and you don't know this, I know much of the viewership probably already knows, but I have this weird affection for this era of car. It's not that I'm going to really try to convince anybody that it's a great era of car. It's not, but I think it's just a byproduct of my natural age of when I'm subscribing to CarCraft magazine in 1999 as a freshman in high school. And you're looking at, in 1999, a 69 Camaro is 30 years old. And so they're getting less and less of those. So that next era, this 1973 to 77 era, it was easier to find at that age a car in great shape that wasn't tore up, just because they were the forgotten era. So I have a special place in my heart for these, and I just feel like it's a great there's a great opportunity to make something cool out of something that everybody sees as forgotten. And before we just jump right into Jason, so I just wanted the crowd to know I'm looking at this full screen. I can't see the video. I can't see the chat. So before we just jump into it, anything I'm missing? Anything I need to know?
No, just simply that I think that guy standing there, I couldn't read the fine print, but it looked like David Hasselhoff. And how fitting would that have been if that's actually him? I don't think it is, but nevertheless, um, one of the
Well,
things that I will say about this era of cars is it brings me back to my childhood, because I'm a 75 child of the 70s. So, we're getting right close to when I was born, and these cars have a little bit more meaning to me that way. And I've got a little story to go with that later on down the road as the show goes. But what we're looking at here is we're looking at Pontiac Buick as well as Oldsmobiles entries into the 1973 market. Now, if you look at the bigger picture, the Oldsmobile, now that is what I would classify as a resto mod. It's not exactly as you would have ordered it off the showroom floor like the other two, but nevertheless, a great rendition of a very ugly car that they decided to take the bumper off in the front and give you some fancy wheels for that Olds 442.
yeah, and I really feel like that the 442, this example, it's missing, like, the 5-mile-an-hour bumpers is what marked this era of car as just grotesque proportions and the worst thing about it. But I still feel like they should have done the classic go-to that everybody does. It's the 67 Camaro bumper that everybody always hacks up and shortens. This car feels like it needs that at the very least. I feel like
definitely missing something.
Splitting that grill or something to break it up. But again, so Jason, you're gonna have to kind of watch the chat here since I'm operating off of a full screen. I can't see it. So what we do is we open it up to the crowd. If you had to build one of these three, which brand are you going with? You going with the Buick? You going with the Pontiac? Or are you going with the Oldsmobile?
I suppose I should be keeping track of this, shouldn't I?
Yeah, that would be good for viewers' choice, because.
Yeah, and I think if I had to look at it, I'm looking at the Olds 442. If we're going with the exact vehicles that we're seeing here, I'm not sure I could go with the 442. I would if it was a stock version. But looking at these, I like the almost the ghost car-esque type picture of the GTO. Although probably one of the most ugly GTOs ever built by Pontiac, but nevertheless, with those what do you call them, dog dish style hubcaps and everything kind of blacked out. I do like that look. Very, very Pontiac Ventura looking in the front too. So I'm going to have to go with that one. A lot of guys are saying, let's see, we got the Will's Wheel says the 442, Mopar Den says the Buick. Mechanics says he'd go with the Buick as well. And Everything is Broken says that he'd like to go for the 73 Delta 88. So we're going to call that an Oldsmobile for voting purposes. And I think at this point we've also got we're going to get to it. I was going to jump in there with the Chevrolet. We're not going to do that. So I think in that particular one, Buick has got the win with 2 votes. So we're going to move on to 1974.
Well, brings up a good point when he mentions the Delta 88. So that is what's interesting about this era of A bodies. So when we did the 64 to 72 A body exercise, almost every year you could notice a front grille change for all three of them. It's a little different here in 73 to 77. They kept a lot of the styles for 2 years in a row, but like like Chevy, you had your Malibu, your Monte Carlo, you had your Cutlass, you had your Delta 88, you had your Pontiac Grand Am, Grand Prix, Pontiac, I'm missing
Century.
one. Yeah, or Buick.
Century.
Sorry, yeah, Buick Century. Yeah, Buick Century, Buick Regal. Pontiac did have one more. The Le Mans, basically.
Yeah, Le Mans.
So anyway, that takes us to 1974. So I try to switch that up and try to go. If we had a Grand Prix in 1 year, I didn't want 2 years of a Grand Prix. So for 1974, we take the Pontiac Grand Am, the Buick Regal, and Olds Cutlass W30. So opening it up to you, Jason, which of the three, I guess if it's me, I actually kind of like the Pontiac styling. I kind of like this point that the hood comes to. I think I'm going to go Pontiac Grand Am here. What say you?
Well, I think I'd be right with you. I think a little bit before I give you my vote, I do like the era of Pontiac still going with the split grille. It's something they were kind of synonymous with, was splitting that grille and keeping that Pontiac logo right in the middle. And you get those classic rally style wheels on there as well. But for 1974, I think I'm going to have to go with the Buick. Buick had a little bit more stylish lines. I love those Keystone style wheels on that car. This particular one is done very classic like, almost original. Obviously, you can tell it probably has tinted windows, but other than that, I'm going Buick in this round. And so is Turlo's Garage. I think he's gone with Buick. Gary Mathis says Grand Am. Mechanic says Cutlass. King Eric says Oldsmobile. And Mopar Den says the Grand Am as well. So Snydertron 3000, hey, thanks for jumping in, Josh, for this episode of the Car Guy SIXFAN show. And he's going to go with the Buick for sure as well. So Turlo's Garage says Pontiac builds excitement, and it shows right here. Absolutely. I couldn't agree with that anymore.
So is that a slight win for Pontiac then on that one?
I would say that's a slight win for Pontiac on this round.
All right. Sorry, Oldsmobile and Swivel Buckets. You lost out. So 1975, things get one more level funky. And again, I didn't want to duplicate the same exact model from year to year as much as I could. So the old Pontiac Grand Prix really, we'll come back to that one for a second. I also thought it was bold that Oldsmobile says, hey, if the market wasn't sold on the W30, let's put out a W25 package. Let's dilute it even more and put it out to the market. But 1975 marked the year that the Buick Century was actually a pace car at a, I think it was Indy 500 maybe, but I'd never seen this one before, and this one was really interesting to me. So I'll let you start, Jason. Which of these three would you be prone to build if one was given to you free?
Well, I think if we go back to that episode that we did in season 5, is one of the things that I stated in that video was I like tribute style vehicles. So in this case, again, for me, this is 2 in a row for the Buick, but the Free Spirit, because of the ridiculous 70s decals or paint job on the side, that's what attracts me to that particular car. The fact that it's kind of I don't want to say a one-off, but it's like a tribute style car to an official pace car. So that's what I like about that particular car. I'm going to be going for Buick. Grant, how about yourself?
I'm going to be right there with you. And I think what does it for me on this particular year is, again, what this whole era of cars struggled with is really bad proportions. But what they did with the grille, making it bigger and cutting down the sheet metal around it, like thinning up where that hood line is, right where it meets the grille. And you almost kind of get this like feel back to the 70 Skylark GS, like with that big like fish mouth, like, or the 72, like that just big open grill area. And that's what I think I'm mostly drawn to on this one. Fairly simple headlight and blinker surround. With not a lot of sheet metal there, whereas you contrast what you see with the Pontiac, a lot of sheet metal, little grill, and it's just kind of like, yeah, stay away from that. I think I'm going Buick as well. What is the crowd? What's it looking like from the crowd?
Well, right out of the gate, the crowd is going Buick. We got Mopar Den Buick, Gary Mathis Buick, Everything is Broken Buick, William Sanders, Turlo's Garage. Hey, Stuff with Cletus has joined us. Thanks for jumping in there. Wheels went with the Grand Prix. Not really sure why. I thought he was a better man than that. No, I'm kidding, Will. I'm just razzing you. But it looks like Buick has stolen the show for 1975. And like again, so let's get away from the Grand Prix for a second. I think we're both in agreement. It's probably the ugliest car here, but the Oldsmobile isn't getting the credit I believe that it deserves here. Like, we're looking at this particular car. Judging by the wheels and the possible pinstripe, it may have been a Hearst car. I don't know. But you talk about the body lines. Look at the way those fenders swoop up in the front and the back of the door. We talk about the disproportion, but like that's very unique because that was a 1 year for for Oldsmobile with those body lines. And I'm certainly glad they changed it in 1976.
Yeah, well, I think the margin between the Buick and the Oldsmobile is probably a lot tighter than. I'm glad you brought it up because I think it's a lot tighter than I think you would think just by first glance. But again, I think it's all in the grill. I think if Oldsmobile, if these cars are given to us for free and you could do whatever you want with it, for me, if I had that Oldsmobile, first thing I do is just extend that grill a little bit further and narrow up that nose piece and make
Yeah,
it feel a
almost like
little
they did in the
more.
Pontiac.
Yeah, well, or make it feel more like 1972-ish. I think that's really not a bad looking car once
Yep.
you do that. And then, of course, you know, me, I'm going to put 18s on it all around and drop it and have some suspension. But
Well, if we do, before you switch the screen there, but before we do, like just exactly what you said about the grill and the Oldsmobile, Pontiac should have done the same thing there. They should have widened the grill a little bit and get those single headlights spaced apart a little bit more. They're just oddly placed, and I think that's what makes this car not so attractive. I'm not going to use the ugly word.
Well, you know, Jason, you and I, we have a saying when we see cars like this, sometimes we're like, you know, it's so bad, it's good. Like
yeah, and this one's just bad.
It is. It's very grotesque, but I feel like it would also be a good candidate for, you know, our Adam from over at Mob Steel. Oftentimes does the you'll see like mid 70s Continentals on some Detroit steel wheels. This feels like if you're gonna do it, just bag the car and be done with it. You're really just kind of going for gaudy at that point.
And the only thing that would have made that car worse is if they painted the same color as your Fairmont.
Yeah. So we move on to the Bicentennial year, 1976. And again, you can already see a change in like we're trying some new things, and this one's actually tough for, well, aside from our friend of the program, Ben Hermance at Hermance Designs and his awesome rendering skills, is kind of cheating, plucking a 442 concept for 1976. I think I know, I'm kind of tilting the stats here, but the old Buick almost has a little family truckster feel to it, but it's funny, this particular year, you can start to see that shift. You can start to see some cues where we're going to move away from the A body into an eventual G body, and I think you can see that in the Century here. But Jason, how do you digest this buffet of sweet cars?
Well, again, if we're going strictly on the vehicles being shown to us right now and not that specific vehicle in general, I would have to go with the Oldsmobile, because we were talking about the proportions of the grill in the previous year in 1975, and I think they fixed that in 76 simply because they added the quad headlight system and gave you kind of a little bit of a filler and narrowed up that center grill. I've always been a part of like a tribute or a special edition type of car. And on this Buick, we're talking again about the Free Spirit and the custom paint or vinyl work that you see on that. And then you got the Grand Prix looking all prim and proper there with the pointy nose and the quad headlight, almost looking at it from that angle, almost looks Lincoln Town Car-ish or Grand Marquis of the same era-ish. Only they're calling it a Pontiac with a grill that wraps up on top of the hood. I'm going to have to go with Buick, and I think simply because of its uniqueness.
Yeah, I think if it's clean slate for me, if it's blank canvas, I probably go Buick too. But the one thing too, what I found in my research, so this year of Cutlass, there were two noses. This is more of that Aero nose, like the Aero Monte Carlo kind of, from your G-body era. But
yep.
They had one that like did the same thing, but went straight up and then 90 degrees. Definitely have to go with this nose. Can you see my cursor, by the way, Jason?
Yep.
Okay. One thing I wanted to just speak to, like what GM just, I think, knocked out of the park for this entire era of car. Well, at least let me say everything that was based off of basically your Malibu platform. But this roof line, I always thought, for the awful proportion of the cars, like this has always been a good looking roof line back here. And they always look good, I think, from the back. But I've got some Chevy examples we'll show here at the end. But how's the crowd voting, Jason?
Well, I think the crowd is a little bit all over the place. I'd much rather have a Pontiac or an Oldsmobile than a Buick, says one fella, John Ditch. And then we've got some Pontiacs, some Buicks, and Snydertron 3000 says he likes the Grand Prix. Let's see here. We're going through Pontiac, Oldsmobile. It's all over the place, and I think there's pretty well equal love. Mexican Spec says he's partial to the Oldsmobile, and thanks for jumping in there, Mexican Spec. Good to see you in the chat. I I think we almost have to call this one a draw. It seems like
Draw.
the votes are all over the place on that one. But
Well,
because I voted for Buick, we're going to call it Buick. So
there we go. Well, and I did too. So since it's the consensus on our end, well, yeah, we'll call it for Buick. For me, the Grand Prix, like I think I could get behind this whole thing. The one thing that except what's out of place is the hood's like bubbly. Like everything's a like square line is a hard edge, and then they just rounded it up in one spot, and it just looks out of place. I just feel like tweak that hood a little differently, and I think I'm liking that car a lot more.
Yeah, again, it's got some curves to it. That angle and in that color doesn't do that hood line very much justice. I think if there was another color, maybe, or a different angle, you might be able to see it a little bit better.
Yeah,
and I would agree. I do like that it went very unique. Wow.
Yeah. So we end on a high note, I suppose.
Yeah, I mean, so 77. You look at the Buick again, and it's got that sloping rear roof line, whereas the Oldsmobile and the Grand Prix kind of have more of a tilted back window, more of an upright type back window. But the Pontiac again kind of still bears that same V nose. I'm liking the Pontiac this time around, I think myself, but you look at the Buick Century in that copperish kind of color, and that's very 70s, late 70s as they brought that color around.
Well, I mean, I think that's a custom paint job.
It possibly is, but it's definitely a color from the 70s for sure.
So my take, well, first off, photo credit, in case anybody from Hot Rod Magazine tunes in, photo credit to Hot Rod Magazine for the Buick Century, and photo credit to volocars.com. I left their logos on there for a reason. So thanks for supplying us with photos. Whether you like it or not, we use them. Again, this is just for everybody's entertainment. It's not for personal benefits, but and it's a little apples to oranges comparison. Like I said, Jason, like with the A bodies, you could kind of go to, if you take the Chevy, it's either these cars are based off of either your Monte Carlo or your Malibu. So like the Century's the Malibu, and the other two are more of your Monte Carlo style. But I think what's interesting for me, again, you can start to see the hues or the cues leading into G body status for like each of these brands. Like the Cutlass, this is very kind of translates into 1978 when it turns into a G body. Your Pontiac, you can see Parisienne, like box Chevy, styling cues here. And then for the, it's kind of you could definitely see Buick Regal here in the front. And of these three, I think it's close to me between, I think my parents had a 76 or 77 Cutlass, so there's some sentimental value there, but I think I'm going to go Buick Century. Slight nod over the Pontiac Grand Am. How's the crowd taking it?
Yeah, so the crowd is looking at, there's some Cutlass in there. There is Mopar Den says he's in for the Cutlass. We've also got Dave Carey for the Cutlass. I think Cutlass is pulling it out here. And one thing that I was going to say before I went to the chat was that, well, you said it where it was you're kind of leading into that 78 model year where they downsized a bit. They went to the G bodies. But the Cutlass here is kind of leaning into that. You know how they always used to use that term, this is not your father's Oldsmobile, or whatever they would say in the slogan back in the day. This was what led into also the Delta 88, 98 style cars and the bigger bodied cars, and kind of getting away from the sporty look and kind of moving into the making a car for every man or every family when they started making some of these designs. The Grand Am still looks like a young person's car. It's got the I don't know what they called it back then, but the shaker hood, I guess, and the fancy pinstriping on it and the wheels.
And I don't know if that was actually ever a factory option for a Grand Am, but I was going to point that out too. Like I think that's for whether it was or not. I assume it's a custom touch, but it actually it's kind of cool. Kind of looks, 1977. Of course, we all know the shaker hood or whatever it's called on the GM side is, Burt Reynolds through and through, but I think it's kind of a cool touch, regardless on this particular one.
And
so
number one in the chat is making a comment. He says it's not a Grand Am; it's a 1 year only Can-Am, and I actually think he might be right on that particular car.
I do see that on the front nose. I think here's the thing: I saw it actually in the Google search. It came across that way. I just assumed it was a spelling error. So thanks for him for pointing that out. Like, it's legit. It's a thing. Yeah. So y'all learned something new.
But having said that, it's kind of along the same lines as, like you where certain names overlap. Like, you get a Lincoln Town Car or a Continental that had a trim package called the Town Car, and then the following year they come out with a Town Car. And same thing with the Pontiac Gto. The GTO used to be a package on the Le Mans, but now it's a GTO. I think that's kind of what they did here was they took a Grand Am and they called it a Can-Am moving in there. And I also seen Big Al had jumped into the chat as well. Thanks, Big Al, for jumping in.
So does I assume Oldsmobile wins 77?
I think we got to put Oldsmobile in there. They seem to have a little bit more votes than everybody else that time around.
So that takes us to the end of, we went 1973 to 1977. So which of the three is the winner tonight? Jason, did you keep track along the way?
Yeah, I think Buick was pretty well leading it most of the way through, and I think we got to kind of call Buick the overall champ of the mid 70s.
Well, I'll stop screen sharing here in a second so I can see everybody's chat and then your face again, Jason. But before we do, I ended up I just threw in some of the Chevy versions through this era. Some of the, again, I'm a guy who likes the pro touring style, so I don't expect everybody to like that either. But so again, we went to our friend, sought the help of Ben Hermance again to his what he's known for was popular hot rodding. Did this special, The Spirit of 76, where he took a bunch of cars from 1976 and did renderings for. So here's his 76 Chevy Chevelle Laguna S3. So pretty cool car. And again, it's that roof line I fall in love with. But any comments from you, Jason, before I move on to the next example?
I've looked at a lot of Ben's renderings, and there's, even though I may not like the car, there's not a rendering I don't like. So I mean, this is a classic case of I really don't like the car, but he really made it come alive here with with the stance and the bigger wheels and a color that you wouldn't never see on that, and a cowl induction style hood, like really made a Laguna turn into something that might be attractive at some point in time.
So I've always had a love-hate relationship with the Laguna because I think it was John Hunkins of Popular Hot Rodding. I think we talked about this when we had Ben on our show. I think back in, was it season 3 maybe? But for whatever reason, the editor of Popular Hot Rodding was over the top in love with Lagunas, and I never quite saw it that way. I came around. I've been back and forth on it. The one thing it has in its advantage, that fiberglass front clip did have a molded bumper, and so it a little easier to finesse that 5-mile-an-hour bumper thing with these noses. But yeah, I mean, I love this rendering. I love the car. Ben's definitely helped push me towards kind of liking them, but I think they're a little bit overrated. So here's a 1974 Malibu that I saw on Hot Rod Power Tour. It's been featured in Popular Hot Rodding as well. There's that roof line I talk about that I think's really nice. Anyway, the cool part about this era car is because the wheel wells are so huge. I think he's running like a 325 out back with it, like no tubbing. So, that is something that these cars do have an advantage. But your take, Jason, on this 74 Malibu?
I like it. I've always been a fan of the Malibus. My sister, when I was growing up, she had a 75, and of course, we'll go back. I was born in 75. And when my older sister had this car, she was in her senior year of high school, and that would have been, I think, in 88. So the car wasn't necessarily that old. It was, 15 years old? 13 years old? 13, yeah. Yeah, so, and it was a nice car. Hers was blue with the white racing stripes, which somebody had added at some point in time. But nevertheless, that's what this car here reminds me of. Is I really enjoyed those cars, and this one here certainly is very simple. and elegant. Looks like he's got the bumper sucked in there a little bit, and filling those wheel wells like crazy. Holy.
Yeah, and it's a pretty impressive. I think it makes over 700 horsepower. Like I should have brought my. I have that issue of popular hot rodding still, but it makes. I think it's got an LS7 in it or something. It's something ridiculous, but and then this is the last example, which I think this is a really tough car to make look cool. The stacked headlight Monte Carlo. I almost feel like this bumper's tucked too much for this car. Something about it looks kind of weird being that tight. But again, when the cards are stacked against you, the reason I love these cars, or the reason why we're even doing this, the offbeat hot rodding thing, the odd body thing, is just showing people like there is a way to actually make something cool out of something not so cool. And I think this car does a good job of that, but it still is. There's a little bit of awkwardness to it.
Well, yeah, in this particular car, like one of the things that the 77s shared with the 78 model Monte Carlo, even though they went to a smaller car and they went to to that G-body car, was these little hooks in the front fender, the forward leaning hooks. Like you got it coming there behind the headlights into the door, and then you got it again behind the door into the rear quarter. They did that in 78 with that new G-body too, and it looked better on the smaller car. They just seem to have rendered it a lot better with those cars. There's a lot of these cars, those 77s, that people mistake my Cordoba for because if they don't know much about cars, they look at them, they're very easily to confuse the two because of the stacked headlight and the long front hood, the short trunk. I get that a lot. Some people, they come up and they think they're being cool and they'll say, "Oh, is that a Monte Carlo?" And I'm like, yeah, nobody, it's not a Monte Carlo.
So I was just gonna say, good to see the chat again. So now I've pulled the full screen share down. So one, I wanted to just let you know, like, yeah, go through our archives of the past season. So I don't remember. I feel like it was wintertime when we interviewed Ben. So it would tell me season, and it definitely wasn't season 5. So I think that means season 3.
Season 3.
But go through our archives. We did an interview with Ben, and he was super generous with his time, and we had a good time with that. Jimmy, seeing friends. So it's cool that you had one of these. You had a 77 Grand Prix. So glad that. I know for some of you, we put you through torture, showing you these ugly cars that nobody wants to touch, that only weirdos like Jason and myself like. But hopefully it was at least a shred of entertainment for you, and so it's really cool seeing someone like Jimmy seeing friends. The fact that he actually had a 77 Grand Prix and was back.
Well, and it's funny that you say that only cars that only you and I like. Well, I think we pulled the wool over our guests' eyes tonight because we had them all voting on which one they like the most. So I don't think there's a lot of hate in these cars. I just think that in some cases they are cars that have been forgotten because they're not the Camaro or in some cases the 70s Chevelles or the Corvettes or whatever the popular cars, the Cudas and stuff like that of the day. Like you said earlier, the fact that you've got it in your mind to make a car look cool, you can take anything, any type of a car. And even today, a lot of people are taking 4-door cars and they're turning them into hot rods. Why? Because they can. Just because it's maybe something that's the only thing that might have been available at the time, or the price was too good to pass up. There's a reason why I kind of hot rodded a long box Chevy pickup. Well, why not? People who want them or who are sought after are doing the short boxes. Well, guess what? The long box, it does ride a little better.
And I also think, like, I'm to the point, and this is actually a good segue into what's coming up on our channels, because my 5-Minute Friday that's obviously due out tomorrow, we'll get into a little bit of this topic. But as you mentioned, like, 2 things, like availability, right? Finding a car in good condition. That's what my channel is supposed to be all about. It's like, it sounds bad when I say it this way, but settle for less out of the gate to like just save yourself problems with like worrying about other things like paint and body is what it's meant to be about. But like, I almost feel like we're getting to a point, like it's fairly, like, once Dodge brought back the Charger and it was a 4-door car, I feel like that went a long ways into, and even the Panther platform, like the Mercury Marauder, the Impala SS, like the 96 Impala SS, having 4 doors, rear-wheel drive, and V8 power was still kind of cool. It wasn't a 2-door and all the same, but it kind of like helped normalize that. And I almost feel like I'm a purist of such that I would rather you, Jason, keep your long box a long box than shorten it into a short box and say it was a short box when it never was. And I hate to pick at our friend DD Speed Shop, but like, you know, he takes all the 4-door Tri-5s and cuts them down and makes them 2-doors. And that's cool. And that's like wicked talent and everything. But I'm actually to the point, like, I guess I'm a little bit of, it's that old historic preservationist in me and purist in me that's like, I just assume keep the 4-door and make something cool out of the 4-door.
Yeah, and again, that's one of those things where you go to a car show, and I mean, of course, having a Fairmont is not something you see where you go to every car show, necessarily one that's been tricked out or whatever. But if you had a 4-door, like our friend Paul, Butt Crack Pizza on Instagram, who's got one that he's got turboed and and all this stuff, you can make it cool if you want to. And one of the big things is that you're not going to meet yourself coming down the road or driving into a car show when you're driving some cool 4-door. Big manufacturers, Ford did it with the Mercury Marauder. Dodge did it right up till a few years ago with the Charger. The thing is that people look at things and today and they say, oh, well, if it's not 4-door or it's not 2-door, it's not cool. I think somebody had mentioned that in the chat earlier, that they were taboo back in the day. Well, yeah, that's why all your Mustangs and your Chevelles and your Cutlasses and all that stuff were always 2-door cars, is because they were preferred. Today, anything is game.
Yeah, and I'm not even going to try to sit here and try to convince someone that 4-doors is always a cooler car than 2-door. It's not. But I'm just saying that don't just discount the 4-door as it can't be cool. Like, I mean, this is probably another legacy episode in of itself, Jason, to talk about. But like I have weird tastes with, like, for a 4-door, it's either got to be like super grotesquely long, or the proportions just have to be right. And sometimes, very few times, but sometimes the 4-door version I think is better than the 2-door in some instances. But like, everybody knows I'm a Ford guy. I'd love to do a Ford Maverick someday, but that's an example of a car that I absolutely would never do a 4-door in. I can't, for some reason, I can't get behind, like, there's nothing cool about a 4-door Maverick for me. Like, if I'm going to ever do a Maverick, it's going to be a 2-door, so that's just an example of, if I'm going to do a 4-door of that era, I would be much more likely to do like a Lincoln Continental, like just bag it out, be grotesque and like just absurd land yacht, like really play that up. But I think it's a fun topic for sure.
Well, and in the chat, there's a couple of guys that have mentioned wagons. And I think if you really want to take that, making something cool that was never meant to be cool, wagons is kind of the new 4-door. Let's make it cool because it's odd, quirky, whatever. I would have to agree with that as well, because I really think that if I ever came across the right 4-door, the right wagon, whether it be a 2-door or a 4-door, because I know the Pintos had some 2-door wagons out there at once upon a time as well. I'd own one. I certainly would. Now that I got this new garage, I think it's got the right opportunity to start packing it full of some really weird looking stuff. In fact, it crossed my mind the other day that maybe it's time to sell something to make room for something different. So that might be a topic of discussion for another video someday or another live stream. But nevertheless, there's so much that you come across when you're traipsing through Facebook Marketplace and whatnot, the buy and sells, the Craigslist, whatever you're looking at, and you say, oh man, if only I had the space, the time, the money, the whatever, the room. Like that's the things that go through, and you keep passing it on, right? So, which
is why I'm trying to sell a Fairmont. But yeah, Jason, let's get into. Well, I'll disagree with you slightly on something you said on the wagons are just now getting cool. I feel like I remember a CarCraft article circa 2000 saying wagons are cool. So I feel like wagons were cooler before just the 4-door sedan was ever cool. I feel like it went 2-door, everybody gravitated for wagons mostly, and then now we finally come around to like, okay, you know what, like we're really slim pickings, like, hey, you know what, hey, 4-doors are cool now. Yeah, build you a 4-door, I feel like that one's taking the longest, but I don't know.
I'll take that. I mean, like, again, anything was cool. Like, let's even take a step back to a hot rodder or to a car guy or gal who has the ability to take anything and make it something, can see that potential no matter what it is.
Yeah, sure.
Right. So again, for car guys, it's easy for us to look back and say, oh yeah, well, of course you can make a wagon cool. Yes, you can make a four-door cool. The trick is to make it cool to a non-car guy or car gal, to have them look at it and say, oh, I never would have thought to do that to a wagon or to a Ford or whatever. So anyways, yeah. I think it's easy to convince a car guy that anything can be cool.
Yeah, either way, we just want to, and what I want my channel to always be about is just like to try to eliminate excuses, to just get into the hobby, just do it, just have the fun. And so in some ways, it doesn't really matter what the car looks like. Yeah. Thank you, Josh. I really appreciate you dropping in. Everything Broken's Garage did ask me how the sale's going. I seem to still get great traffic on my Fairmont ad. I only have it up on Facebook Marketplace. I didn't put it on Craigslist because it seems like Craigslist is kind of dying out. So I didn't really see the point of. But I'm at the point now where it's like, well, all you have to do is copy and paste everything, so it's not going to hurt anything. I seem to I average about 2 new requests a week. Only one person's come to look at it. I did have a truck driver who wanted to come look at it, but it just didn't work out with routes and stuff recently, so he bailed on me day of, basically. He's from Arizona. So I don't know. I feel like it's listed at, if I'm still getting that traffic, it's listed at an okay price. But Jason, what's coming up on Old Car Guy? What can we expect coming up on Old Car Guy?
Well, that's hard to say. There's a couple of things that are going on. I've been really doing my best at trying to get videos started that are maybe a long-term type video, rather than just recording something and putting it out, is recording it, editing it, setting it aside until something more comes along with it. I've got a couple of those videos going, but there will be a garage update sometime in the near future. There's also going to be a couple of, I don't want to give it away too much. There'll be something new that you normally wouldn't see from Old Car Guy, that I'm hoping that if we can put this together a couple of 2 or 3 times a year, this type of video, to see where that traction goes. I'm going to experiment a little bit with them to see if we can't get a little bit more foot traffic into the views segment of Old Car Guy, because that seems to be where I feel my channel is lacking. So you got to try some new things. We're going to experiment with that a little bit here in the near future. You guys are going to see that video. One of those videos probably pop up late next week. And I'm working on something to drop here for the weekend. So Grant, how about yourself? You got something you mentioned earlier about your 5-Minute Friday?
Yep. That's the one due up. And then, I kind of mentioned in my New Year's State of the Channel episode that, again, like you, Jason, I was originally not going to do it because they don't get a lot of views, but it was, since I hadn't put out content in a long time, it's like, well, you need something out there anyway, so do it. That's more views than no views, right? I mentioned dialing back to an every other week upload, and the way it's going to time out is I'll have an upload when I'm not hosting CarrGuy and SIXFAN show, the Wednesdays that I'm not hosting, and then I'll have this. So what I think Wednesday is going to be is finally the cinematic version of a before and after for Project Low Fairmont. But that's one of those ones, if something else comes up, I can shoot that. That's evergreen content. That one could be posted in March and have the same effect as it would if I posted it Wednesday. So I think that's what you'll probably see next week. But look forward to 5-Minute Friday tomorrow. I think it's a good one. It's duplicating one of my best ones from 2021 and doing the 2022 version. So look for that. Well, and I will say, and if you guys haven't seen Grant's last video, I guess it wasn't specifically a 5-Minute Friday, but his video that he put out last week, it had me, I don't want to say laughing, it had me with a smile on my face, because I'm thinking, there's the Grant that I see behind the camera, and there's the Grant who needs to show himself a little bit more when he's in front of the camera. Him and I have had this conversation kind of off camera before, and that was my advice to him, was try to be more you, and that video did it.
and it was very well done, and it had me smiling, not just because of what you were talking about, but because I could see a little bit more of Grant as opposed to the guy behind they're the sort of the guy that's in front of the camera that's trying to be prim and proper, and I do the same thing. And that is one of the things that I'm going to focus on in 2022 is just trying to turn off the radio voice and be just.
But it sounds so good.
And maybe it does, and there's a time and a place for that. But unfortunately, I don't think that the time and place for that is necessarily in the video trying to be me. There's a lot of people who have told me that when they watch the CarrGuy and SIXFAN show and they see exactly who Jason is when he's talking, like I am right now, that's who they want to see on camera. And unfortunately, that's not who comes across on camera a lot of the times, because I don't have Grant standing there right beside me to talk to a lot of the time. I don't have someone, to interact with. It's mostly just me. So I'm going to do my very best. My point is, if you haven't watched Grant's last video, go back and watch it. You'll be really impressed. I was, and I don't think they'll be disappointed.
Well, thanks, Jason. That does mean a lot. And I've heard, that we've talked about this more than once, and a lot of people say like, "Hey, think about like you're just talking to your friend when you're looking at the camera," and that doesn't work for me. But I think I found my thing. What that anecdote's trying to tell me, whatever that thing is, I found what that is for me. I think to do, and I don't know that tomorrow's upload is going to be as good in that sense as the one on New Year's Eve that went up. That was sort of in 5 Minute Friday format, but I think it's pretty close. I think I can excel in this format. So I really do appreciate the kind words, and that is what I'm actually hoping that the every other week upload is to help facilitate, is to be more cognizant of that, because I think while the prim and proper is sort of a defense mechanism, it's also just that sometimes when you get into the routine of like, I got to get an upload up, and you just do it. Yeah. And so I think you kind of like shave some of those things off just to get it done. For sure. So
we've got a $5 super chat coming in there from Mopar Den. Thanks a lot for supporting Grant and his channel. One thing I did see, I wanted to mention it when I saw it earlier. I believe it was Prepping Life had mentioned he's recently retired. So congratulations to Prepping Life,
Johnny. Yeah, congratulations.
Hopefully you can find something to do with your time that you want to do, and not what somebody else wants you to do. If you know what I'm getting at. So hopefully you enjoy your retirement. I had an idea, and I think the idea is that what I'm going to do is I'm going to get a picture of Grant. I'm going to tape it to the back of my camera. That way, when I'm doing a video, I can just acknowledge Grant like he's standing right there and make up comebacks for in the way that Grant
Americanisms
in the way that Grant would. So we could have some back. Anyway, no, I'm kidding. I think that was a pretty good show. I think it was a great introduction to season 7. We probably should take just a quick minute to highlight some of the people. I think we did it in our Christmas special, but
yeah, go for it.
To highlight some of the guests that we have coming through, I'm going to list off 2 or 3 and not the whole thing. We will post this later on once we get it filled up. 802 Garage. If you guys don't know who 802 Garage is, he's big on TikTok. He's putting a V10 Dodge motor into a Subaru. And look, he's doing it right. If you'd ever thought that one of those would fit into a Subaru, well, he's got it in there, shoehorned in. We've also got Mike, the Chevy dude, coming on in February. So Mike Davenport will be here as well. And we've also got Robert from Aging Wheels coming up in April. So I hope you guys can tune in to the CarrGuy and SIXFAN show as we share responsibilities. Every week it's every other week it's on one of our channels. So this week Grant's hosting. Next week it'll be over on my channel. So I hope you guys can all follow us over there to Old CarrGuy next Thursday evening at 7 o'clock Central, 8 Eastern. We'll do this all over again, where 802 Garage will be our first guest of the season, and you guys will get to see and listen to what he's got going on in his garage.
Well, and again, since it is episode 1 of season 7, I think it's worth kind of regurgitating some ground rules of things that happen regularly on the CarrGuy and SIXFAN show, much like Jason just mentioned. It does alternate from channel to channel. But again, Mopar Den, thanks for the $5 in super chats. That's one of those things that much like the last 2 seasons. Jason and I do keep track of what that is, and that does pay some dividends at some point in time. I'll just put it that way. So appreciate your $5, and just know we're writing that down. So
yeah, and Casey mentioned too that in 2 weeks he'll be the guest back here on Straight Six Fans channel. So if you guys don't know who Patina Pit Stop is, Casey's going to be a guest on Grant's channel in 2 weeks' time. So be happy to have him over here as well.
Well, with that, Jason, we've kind of hit the I won't say limit, but I don't know that any. Yeah, I don't know anything we say at this point is going to be added value. So why don't you just close us on out and take us home?
Yeah, so guys, thanks again for tuning into the Car Guy and Six Fan Show season opener for season 7. We're really excited to bring another season full of guests and fun times to entertain you guys. We really appreciate everybody coming over and being a part of the show. Grant, thanks for 6 seasons. Thanks for being agreeable to a 7th, and hopefully we can have the best season ever. Guys, thank you so much for being on the Car Guy and Six Fan Show Season 7 premiere. Next week, it's again over on my channel for episode 2 with our very first guest of the season. Guys, stay focused on the windshield, not the rearview mirror. See you next week.